A St. Louis teacher collapses in front of her class. Her organs are shutting down, and her students are panicked. Frantic doctors struggle to uncover the source of her mysterious condition. But science makes a shocking revelation. What once was thought an illness is now believed to be a crime. In Columbus, Ohio, a woman is found shot in the head. The death is ruled a suicide. But something is not right, and detectives refuse to let the matter rest. To find answers, investigators must decipher a pattern, unraveling the mystery that leads to murder. The meticulous work of forensic experts can often find even the smallest traces left by a killer and put an end to their murderous attraction. In this episode, some of the names have been changed. September 26, 1993, St. Louis, Missouri. Donna Bolley, a 7th grade math teacher and mother of 2 teenaged sons, was in the middle of her lesson. She hadn't been feeling well all summer, but thought it was just the flu.
And Kenneth, let's move on down to number 9.
She hoped it would pass once the school year began.
Which one are you going to do first?
But it didn't. It got worse.
Hold on, what's it?
She collapsed in front of her class.
Bolley, you okay? I'm sure I do.
Alarmed students called for the principal.
She was teaching? Yeah, she was teaching physics.
Paramedics arrived to find Donna struggling to breathe. They had no idea what was wrong with her or why she collapsed. Medics tried to stabilize her, but her body was shutting down. She was losing consciousness. Donna was fighting for her life. In the emergency room, doctors fought to save her. But it wasn't enough. Even with their best efforts, Donna was still struggling. She was now paralyzed, with no feeling in her arms and legs. She was immediately hooked up to a ventilator to help her breathe. Critical care specialist Dr. Gregory Becker.
We had no idea what was wrong with her. She had nonspecific symptoms. She developed numbness of the lower extremities, confusion, had a seizure. Their oxygen levels were dropping, and she appeared to have respiratory difficulties. We were baffled, really, with what was going on.
Jim Bolley, Donna's husband, rushed to check on his wife. The attending doctors assured him they were doing everything possible, but the prognosis wasn't good. Donna was in critical condition. Jim told doctors Donna had been feeling ill, but it had never been this bad. Donna was in cardiac arrest. Doctors desperately tried to get her heart beating again.
All right, let's do it again. Turn it up higher, nurse. All right, here we go. And clear. 1, 2, 3.
She had a variety of symptoms that we couldn't pigeonhole in a single diagnosis.
Doctors stabilized Donna and took her to the ICU. But they still had no idea what was causing Donna's symptoms.
When we come to a situation like this where a patient is getting more and more ill, right in front of us is we'll shotgun a variety of tests.
But the test results showed nothing.
I'm gonna have to go to the side.
Jim stayed by his wife's side.
So you promise me you'll drink it all, okay?
He brought her flowers, cards, and her favorite milkshakes. He did everything he could to care for her. As the mysterious disease ravaged Donna's body, the search for the diagnosis continued.
One of the full battery of tests that we did was a urinary heavy metal screen. When it came back, her urinary excretion of arsenic was sky high, astronomical.
Donna's body was being poisoned.
Mr. Bolley.
The amount of arsenic in her system was 420 times the normal amount.
Apparently, she has arsenic.
Why were the levels so high, and how did it get into her system?
Does she do any type of garden?
Concerned others were exposed to the arsenic, doctors immediately informed Donna's family and also called police. Jim Bolley told doctors he had no idea how this could have happened and wanted a full police investigation.
She was poisoned by someone.
Officers arrived at the hospital and interviewed doctors, nurses, and all those who cared for Donna. But no one had ever seen anything like this before. St. Louis County Police Detective Tony Grimmel was the lead investigator on the case.
I found out that from the hospital that Donna Bolley's level of arsenic was right at the lethal dosage, and that she was on the fence and could possibly die.
Since arsenic poisoning is rare, Detective Grimmel needed to do research on the toxin.
I determined as much as I could about arsenic and found out that it is in pesticides and herbicides. It's also found in the environment, in well water.
Detective Grimmel had hoped to speak to Donna, but that would be impossible.
At that point in time, that not only was she in critical condition, but she was paralyzed from the neck down and unable to speak.
Unable to communicate with Donna, the detectives would have to find their answers another way. They asked hospital personnel to contact them if they came up with any new information. Nurses were stationed in Donna's room around the clock to monitor her condition.
Skin color? Okay.
Detective Grimmel's next step was to determine whether he was dealing with accidental exposure or something criminal.
This is the first type of arsenic case that I've ever been involved in. The questions that we didn't have answers to is, how did she get it in her system? What type of arsenic it was? Where it came from?
To find the answer, the detective turned to an expert at the St. Louis County Medical Examiner's office. He met with Chief Toxicologist Dr. Christopher Long.
Arsenic symptoms are so common and typical of like the flu or possibly food poisoning that most physicians tend to focus on that area to see if there's some sort of biological reason why you have these symptoms. And they don't really consider arsenic or heavy metal poisoning.
But arsenic poisoning is much worse than any flu. It attacks the body's red blood cells, eating away at them until the body completely shuts down.
Everybody has arsenic in their system, but in normally low levels that don't offer any symptoms or any problems.
But the levels in Donna's system suggested something else.
Due to the high levels, it appeared to be administered to her, either self-administered or administered by someone else.
Although environmental factors such as a tampered water supply were not ruled out, investigators had to look at all the possibilities, including attempted suicide or murder. Detectives visited the Bolley home. Hoping to develop leads, investigators interviewed Donna's husband and her teenaged sons. Jim Bolley said Donna had no history of depression. She never spoke about taking her own life and never attempted suicide. But the family mentioned Donna had trouble with several students who were angry with her over grades. Jim also said Donna had trouble with a teacher who used to work with her. and Donna was an easy target.
Giving her a hard time, something like that?
He felt that since she kept a cup of water on her desk at all times, that anybody at school could have administered the poison to her by dropping it into her glass or cup on her desk.
While at the house, investigators took a sample of the family's tap water. It was sent to the lab for analysis.
From what the boys said,
They collected canisters, jars,
quite a bit.
and utensils. Detectives also collected household products and cleaners.
These.
They were looking for anything that either contained arsenic, such as pesticides, or any kitchen items that may have been contaminated.
This was done to remove anything from the house that might make the children ill if there was any arsenic in it, and also to include or exclude any of these items as being used in poisoning of Donna.
In the bathroom, police found hypodermic needles.
In your restroom?
Jim told investigators the hypodermic needles were used by one of the boys for medication.
We're going to go ahead and take
They were
this in.
taken with the other items to be tested.
Okay? Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Student.
Detective Grimmel went to the school to follow up on the family's suspicions. The principal said although Donna was often sick, she was in good spirits and was not depressed.
Deportment records.
He also told the detective the problems with the former co-worker and the angry students were not serious. And none of them had been at the school in months.
There's nothing negative in either of these children's
Grimmel
files.
now believed if Donna was poisoned, it did not happen at school. At the Identification Bureau of the St. Louis County Police Department, the household items were tested for arsenic.
Okay, great. Thanks.
The syringes found in the Bolley home were quickly ruled out. As the husband said, they were used for prescribed medication for one of the boys. And all the other tests came back negative. None of the household items contained the deadly poison. The water was also clean. Detective Grimmel was at an impasse, and there were no leads in sight.
I didn't believe that in a family of four, one person could have accidentally ingested a lethal amount of arsenic at home, and the others have no signs of arsenic in their system. So what I was looking at was self-inflicted, where it was an attempted suicide, or that it was used as a weapon in an attempt to kill her.
And the one person who could shed light on the investigation was the only person who wasn't talking. St. Louis schoolteacher Donna Bolley collapsed in her classroom and was now lying in intensive care. High levels of arsenic were found in her system. Detectives believe Donna was either trying to kill herself or someone else was trying to kill her. After following up leads at both her school and her home, they came up empty. Detectives began asking questions. If someone wanted her dead, who could it be, and what was their motive?
She's pretty busy and stressed out at work.
They decided to look into the Bolley family's financial records. It didn't take long before Detective Tony Grimmel found a life insurance policy on Donna, and it was recently increased from $200,000 to $600,000. And there was something else. Accounts showed that the family carried $20,000 in credit card debt. The case was heating up, and then Detective Grimmel received a call. It was Donna's nurse, and she was calling from the hospital. She said that despite intensive treatment to rid Donna's body of the poison, she was getting worse. And she said she noticed a pattern. After each of Jim Bolley's visits, his wife suffered a relapse. Despite Donna's serious condition, Detective Tony Grimmel had to find a way to communicate with her.
Hi, Jim. She was paralyzed from the neck down, and she couldn't speak. Basically, all she could do was shake her head yes and no, and she had eye contact. She couldn't write because of her paralyzation. She looked pretty bad. If you could wait out there with the boys in the waiting room.
The detective needed to speak to Donna alone.
Even though Donna couldn't talk, she could communicate and made arrangements to communicate with her at the hospital. The hospital had been using a alphabet board in order to communicate with Donna. She could shake her head yes and no, so she could answer questions that required a yes and no answer, but if there was anything more specific, she had to spell it out using the alphabet board. The first thing I talked to Donna about was to see if she had administered this to herself, if she had attempted suicide, and she said she had not. I asked her a series of yes and no questions as much as I could. I asked her if she thought she got the poison at home. She indicated no. If she got it from friends, she indicated no.
Detective Grimmel didn't want to tire Donna, even though he still didn't get the answers he needed. He would have to come back.
As I started to leave, she started shaking her head no, started crying. I was concerned from, she was, I don't want to say frantic, but she was upset, clearly upset. I was afraid maybe she was in pain, having some problems. I called a nurse in to check with her. She said she didn't want me to leave, that she wasn't in pain, that there was something else I needed to know. And the first thing she spelled out for me was that she was afraid Jim, her husband, was involved. M? Jim? Is that your husband, Jim? Okay. Do you feel he's involved in this?
Slowly and painfully, nodding at each question and letter of the alphabet, Donna recalled a curious incident 2 months before.
M-I-L.
Alright, have a good day.
It happened on a busy morning as the family was rushing through breakfast and Donna was preparing for her class. Jim Bolley always did the cooking. It was his idea to take some of the burden off of his wife. He gave Donna a glass of milk to settle her stomach and reminded her to drink it. It was then Donna saw pink residue at the bottom of the glass. Donna's story placed her husband under suspicion. This, coupled with the recent increase in Donna's life insurance, made Jim Bolley the prime suspect in his wife's poisoning. But investigators were a long way from proving he was trying to kill his wife. Detective Grimmel asked Donna for a hair sample. It was sent to the lab to establish a poison timeline. And there was one more thing, Jim's visits.
I called the hospital to tell them that Mr. Bolley wasn't allowed to see his wife anymore. I contacted security and put a freeze on visits because I thought there was a possibility he was also administering some of this at the hospital. After my interview, I went out to the waiting room. The first thing he asked me was, "What did she tell you?" I told him that she told me a number of different things and that he and I were going to have to talk again, and we were going to have to talk at the police department.
More evidence surfaced when Donna's relatives discovered a gym bag hidden at the Bolley home. They brought it to police. Detectives were puzzled by what they found inside. Other women's lingerie.
All in this bag, and I know that's not hers. And then there's these ads for escort services.
Ads for local escort services. Love notes.
He's maybe taking out some.
These notes, where'd you find these?
Contents also included photos of naked women and sexual paraphernalia.
Bag here, and the bag was.
It was out in.
We obtained cell phone records and found out that he was using 2 dating services, and that he was using his cell phone for this.
At the toxicology lab of the St. Louis County Medical Examiner's Office, Donna's hair was tested. hair grows about an inch a month. And because the arsenic attaches to the follicles and stays there, scientists can get an accurate timeline of the poisoning. Her hair provided answers to the questions when, how much, and for how long Donna was ingesting arsenic. Chief toxicologist Dr. Christopher Long performed an atomic absorption test.
The arsenic analysis, you can't see that because it's done on a molecular level, and you can't see the little molecules or electrons. The computer can determine the difference in the light absorption, print out a concentration, and it's all done on computer.
The results came in.
From her hair, we clearly showed that at the far end there was no arsenic. That was somewhere 5 or 6 months earlier. From that point on, the arsenic levels in her hair increased, and they increased dramatically every month, up till and including the time of her hospital admission. This would show that she had been exposed over a period of time, and the dose was being increased over that time.
The toxicologist reported his findings to investigators.
Well, it was really an opportunity to put the science to work, to show how toxicology is part of the picture, and sometimes we can be a very important part of the picture in determining if somebody's a bad person or not.
Police asked Jim Bolley to come in to answer questions.
Right here, Jim, this room here.
Jim Bolley seemed to be the perfect husband. He worked as a high school counselor, coached baseball, and was a scout leader.
I told him that she was pointing the finger at him, and that he was now the prime suspect, and I advised him of his rights. He was more than willing to cooperate, and he tried to explain away the pink milk and her feeling that he was a suspect.
Well, she's got poison in her system.
Bolley claimed that his wife's illness had caused her to have hallucinations.
She's confused. We got a wonderful situation.
Detectives asked him about the $600,000 insurance policy on Donna, about his financial difficulties, and about his extramarital affairs.
Somebody's trying to hurt her.
Talking for hours, Jim Bolley seemed to have an answer for everything.
Trying to waste
But he
my-
explained those away, and he was good at explaining things away.
Bolley's background was in psychology. He seemed in control. So detectives took a new approach.
Have you noticed throughout this thing that whenever he's talking, he's in control and as big as life, but when we talk, he shrinks back in his chair? Have you noticed that?
Yeah, he seems real confident and comfortable when he's talking, and
Very uncomfortable when you're talking.
right.
I think what we should do is go back in there and just hammer him and just get up on the podium and don't let him talk at all. Just give him everything you've got.
This time, they would be verbally aggressive and not let him redirect blame.
I've been listening to you all night long. Now it's time for you to listen to me.
Well, I think
No,
what
no,
you
no,
need to-
wait a minute. I've listened to you all
Laying
night.
out the
Now
case
it's my
against
turn.
him,
You listen to me.
investigators didn't let Bolley answer for an hour and a half.
No, I'm doing the talking. At the end of all that, hour and a half or so, when he first did speak, he asked me, how much time do you think I'm going to get? Which in itself was a tacit admission, but not a confession.
After over 8 hours of questioning, investigators still couldn't get Bolley to confess to poisoning his wife. With nothing solid to hold him, Detective Grimmel went to the district attorney. St. Louis prosecutor Bob McCullough had to make the decision.
Actually, we had very little evidence. It was one of those where you knew that the guy did it, but whether we were going to be able to prove it or not at that point was kind of up in the air.
But detectives wouldn't give up and continued to keep pressure on Bolley to get a confession. But Jim Bolley still wouldn't crack. And without stronger evidence, police feared the man they suspected of poisoning his wife would walk free. Someone was trying to kill Donna Bolley. 420 times the lethal dose of arsenic was discovered in her system.
Donna, what I'd like to
And
do
police
is
believed they knew who was
visit
responsible,
in the third room.
Donna's husband, Jim.
Is it the letter I?
Detectives were mounting a solid case against Jim Bolley. They discovered he was patronizing sex services and bought a $600,000 life insurance policy on his wife.
Want to have a seat there?
Detectives brought Jim in for questioning, hoping to break him, but he had been
You know why we're
stonewalling
here?
them for hours.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about Donna, and would like you to tell us what happened to her.
Detective Tony Grimmel went to the prosecutor's office to try to get an arrest warrant.
You need to do the right thing, and you and I both know what that is. You know, look at yourself. Look at this place you're at now.
At the same time,
Why don't you tell me
Bolley
what
finally
happened?
confessed he had been poisoning Donna.
I didn't want to kill her. I only wanted to make her a little sick. You gotta believe me. I just wanted to make her a little sick. She was really stressed. It's been a long summer. And I thought
But he wouldn't admit he was trying to kill her.
Yes, Lieutenant Varner over at the police department. Detective Grimmel's there applying on a warrant. Could I speak with him, please?
St. Louis Detective Tony
Grimmel.
Grimmel was seeking the arrest warrant.
Tony, Bolley's over here confessing to Barra right now.
He used that for the reason of the poisoning,
I only wanted
that
to make
he and
her
his
a little
wife
sick.
haven't had much quality time together.
You gotta believe
He
me. I
wanted
just
to make her
a little
sick so she would stay home from work, and he could burn up his sick time and stay home with her and care for her and have some quality time with her.
Jim Bolley was taken into custody. He told investigators where he had hidden a box of rat poison in the house. He took police to the garden store where he purchased the poison.
Hi, glad you could come.
He even pointed out which brand he bought.
This is the product that you bought?
Yeah.
For months, Bolley had carefully prepared potions of arsenic to feed to his unsuspecting wife. He told police he dissolved the poison in water before adding it to Donna's
guys.
food or drink.
Time to hit the bed.
Investigators asked police chemists to check Bolley's story in the lab. They found the poison gave water a pink tint. When the mixture was added to milk, it did not color the milk, but it did leave a small pink residue. For years, Jim Bolley had been living a double life with expensive adulterous affairs. Police say when it caught up with him, Bolley carefully planned to get rid of Donna and collect enough money to continue his other life.
Where's your medicine?
But it didn't work. Medical and forensic science were able to stop him from killing Donna.
Okay. You want me to help you?
St. Louis prosecutor Bob McCullough had a strong case.
The charge that we filed, assault in the first degree, is the most serious charge there is, short of death. It carries a punishment of 10 to 30 years or life in prison. In addition to that, we filed an armed criminal action charge because he used poison in order to commit his crime, and that gave the potential of another life sentence.
Jim Bolley was found guilty of trying to kill his wife by poisoning. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. St. Louis medical personnel and detectives intervened and saved a woman's life. But tragically, in Ohio, the intervention came too late. Columbus, Ohio lies at the center of America's heartland. In early 1994, the city's police found themselves at the center of a brutal and mysterious case. At 2:51 a.m., police received a frantic 911 call.
Are you with her now?
The caller identified himself as Richard A. He said his wife had just committed suicide.
Well, we'll
The
get
operator
90
asked him to
police
stay
out
calm
right away.
and wait for emergency personnel who were on the way.
Sergeant 18-180-181 on a 47A. Looks like it's gonna be a 43, possible 47.
Columbus Police Department officers arrived at the address. No one was there to meet them, They called out, but there was no response.
Columbus Police! Police! Hello, Columbus Police!
Tentatively, the officers entered the residence.
Got an empty hallway, it's clear. Kitchen's clear.
It looked as if the house was empty. In the master bedroom, Robert A. was at the foot of the bed.
Show me your hands!
He seemed dazed, confused, and unable to move. On the bed, a woman lying on her back with a gunshot wound to the left side of her head.
She's my wife.
A blue steel .38 caliber revolver was resting on her blood-smeared chest.
A?
Aye.
Responding police officers questioned Robert A.
Are you okay, sir?
He told them he went into his bedroom and found his wife. He had no idea what happened.
How much have you had to drink tonight, sir?
Officers noted he appeared to have been drinking.
Drinks of beer. How much beer?
I don't know.
Medics were called to the scene. Without disturbing the body, they examined the woman.
It's at 3:03 a.m.
Janet A. was dead.
Radio medics pronounced at 3:03 a.m.
Within minutes, homicide detectives arrived at the house. They are required to investigate any gun-related death. Detectives were briefed by the officers at the scene. Detective Eric Pilya was the lead investigator on the case.
A small, dark-colored revolver was laying on top of her chest, and there was an extensive amount of blood that had come from the wound and run down her body along her appendages and pooled in several areas.
The detective interviewed Janet's husband, Robert.
Detective Pilya?
He still appeared to be in shock and was non-responsive.
My first impression of the husband was that he was either extremely distraught to the point of being in shock, or extremely lethargic or drugged, unemotional, just kind of dazed.
When A composed himself, he told investigators earlier that evening he and his wife watched some television after dinner.
Fell asleep?
She was leaving for a business trip to Cincinnati early the next morning. Robert told investigators Janet was nervous about her trip.
I'll miss you, but I'll be all right.
She was deathly afraid of public speaking.
I have to go to bed. I have to get some rest, okay?
She wanted to get a good night's sleep, so she kissed him goodnight and went upstairs to bed. A said he stayed up a little later and watched a kickboxing movie on television.
So he fell asleep on this couch here. He explained that he had fallen asleep on the couch. He had woke up, decided to go to bed, went upstairs, turned on the light to the bedroom, and found his wife laying there with a gunshot wound to her head. He said that he then went and checked for a pulse.
He was shocked when he found his wife had committed suicide. He had been asleep and didn't even hear the shot. At first glance, the investigation appeared routine. A tragic suicide, a distraught husband left to pick up the pieces of his life. But few investigations are ever routine, and Detective Pilya knew this one would be no different. In Columbus, Ohio, Robert A. woke up to a nightmare. After falling asleep on a couch while watching television, he got up and went upstairs. There, he found his wife, Janet, shot in the head at point-blank range. There was a smear of blood across her chest, and a revolver was next to her hand.
What have you done?
A told detectives Janet was nervous about a business trip she was to take the next day. He feared that might have caused her to take her life.
Then what happened?
A said he kept a gun in the house for self-protection.
I woke up.
He normally
And
kept
I
it under
got
the
up
sofa
and I went
where he had
upstairs.
been sleeping. But it wasn't there.
Do you remember what was
He
on?
said Janet must have taken it earlier or while he was asleep.
watching a game.
Detective Eric Pilya asked Robert A. what he remembered.
Right here. I asked him, you know, did you touch the body? At first he said no. Then he said, well, I checked for a pulse and explained that he had been a medic in Vietnam. I asked him specifically how he did that, and he said that he had touched her neck to check for a pulse.
Crime scene investigators photographed the scene, documenting the position of Janet's body, her arms, and the blood swipe across her upper chest. They rearranged her hair to get a better look at the blood pattern. The gun was collected along with other evidence. In searching the room, detectives also noted a flashlight on the dresser. Janet's body was taken to the coroner's office for examination. Officers checked for any signs of forced entry. They found none. At the Franklin County Coroner's Office, the medical examiner swabbed the victim's hands and examined the rest of her body. He took blood samples for a toxicology screening. Janet's head was x-rayed to determine the angle in which she was shot and the path of the bullet. All the physical evidence supported a self-inflicted injury, and the autopsy report classified Janet A.'s death as a suicide. But to the seasoned homicide investigators, something still didn't seem right. Robert A.'s story wasn't adding up.
I made a mental note when he told me that he had turned the light on, that that's not something normal. That seemed abnormal to me, that someone would turn their wife's sleeping in bed and they're going to go and turn the light on and wake them up as they're going to bed. That just kind of seemed funny to me at that time.
Investigators decided they needed to find out more about Janet's state of mind.
Okay, that'd be fine. I mean, that's understandable.
They spoke to her parents to see if Janet suffered from depression or was upset about anything. Janet's parents said she was fine. In fact, she had been looking forward to her business trip. The parents' comments didn't seem to support the coroner's findings, according to homicide detective Carl Rankin.
It seemed that Janet A. wasn't a very good candidate for suicide, and that she did, in fact, have things to look forward to, even as soon as the next day.
The detective asked about Janet's relationship with her husband.
Robert A. was insisting to go to Cincinnati also, and the fact that Janet didn't want him to go. They spoke about taking care of the dog, and that Janet A. didn't really feel comfortable even leaving the dog with Robert A.
Janet told her parents Robert had been seeing another woman for several months. Just 3 weeks before her death, Janet said she was planning to divorce him.
She had a dog she loved. She had...
This strengthened investigators' suspicions that Janet A. may not have taken her own life. But they needed proof, so they went back to the crime scene and started from scratch. They re-examined photographs and noted Janet's head wound was on the left side. When they interviewed friends and family members, they discovered that Janet was right-handed. The gun was also positioned very awkwardly in her hand, according to Detective Rankin.
The butt of the gun was facing the opposite way of the hand. The barrel was, in fact, pointing upward.
This would be a difficult shot for a right-handed person. At the crime lab, toxicology results on Janet's blood came back. It appeared she had taken a massive dose of sleeping pills. Perhaps she had tried to kill herself with pills, and when that didn't work, she got the gun. But there was one problem.
The toxicologist's opinion was that Janet A., after taking that many drugs, would not have been able to form a thought pattern to have been in bed, taken the drugs, gone downstairs, taken a gun out of below the sofa where Robert A. was sleeping, walked back upstairs, gotten back in bed, and shot herself.
Despite trouble in the marriage and a minor domestic incident, detectives had little else.
I'd like to talk to you back here. Okay.
But that changed. Police got a break when a call came in from a woman who said she was the last person to talk to Janet the night she died.
Okay.
The woman was Janet's close friend, but she hadn't come forward because she was afraid of Robert's violent temper.
Again,
She told police that the night Janet died, she had come over to borrow a dress.
Yeah, that's nice.
Janet was excited and looking forward to her trip to Cincinnati,
Oh, wait, you know
and
what?
glad to have time away from her husband.
That I borrowed.
Kind of upset.
On the night Janet
about
died, she called and talked to her friend at 11:30 p.m.
47 Jewett
She was
Road.
whispering and said Robert was angry and arguing.
Yes, I was.
He wanted to go on the Cincinnati trip with her, but Janet had refused. The friend told investigators that Janet then abruptly said Robert was coming into the room and she had to go. Janet quickly hung up.
Very violent temper.
It was the last time anyone heard from her.
Not exactly.
Pieces were falling into place. Detectives were now ready to confront Robert A.
You know, we've been wondering about.
They told him they needed the truth
Why would there be
and
a
arranged
flash?
for a polygraph test and asked him to take it.
Why would it be right out on the dresser?
I don't know. I want to talk to my lawyer.
Robert, I don't have any problem with you talking to your attorney.
To prove that Janet's death was not a suicide but cold-blooded murder, detectives needed hard evidence, and that evidence was right in front of them in the crime scene photos.
At that time, it was determined that if we were going to have any substantial evidence out of the blood spatter evidence contained within the photographs, that we were going to have to consider going outside of the department and hiring an individual to take a look at these photographs.
Story of, I don't remember.
Up to this point, detectives' beliefs were just another theory, but the coroner's report was conclusive. If they hoped to reopen this case, they needed a lot more than theory. They needed science to back up their suspicions. Janet A.'s death had been ruled a suicide. But detectives were troubled by the evidence. She was right-handed, but the gun was found near her left hand.
Yeah, I made the call, but you know how it is.
Her husband, Robert A., was the only other person in the house.
They're not there.
Yeah. You know, she had
Friends and
dogs.
family said the couple's marriage was rocky. Weeks before her death, she said she intended to divorce him.
Let Jeff know where he
Detectives were certain it was murder, and Robert A. was the prime suspect. But to prove their case, they had to turn to a forensic specialist. Columbus police contacted a renowned blood spatter expert. They took the crime scene photographs to Corning, New York, where Professor Herbert McDonald is director of the Laboratory of Forensic Science.
They just objectively wanted me to look at the pictures and see if I could form an opinion based principally on the bloodstain patterns that were present in the pictures.
To Dr. McDonald, something in the pictures didn't make sense.
You can't have a gun after you've shot yourself in the head, fall down on your chest, and then somehow reach up underneath it and smear blood across. It's the sequence is wrong. The obvious thing is it was a homicide and not a suicide. Lying in this position.
It was the information the detectives had been waiting for and the proof they needed. Detectives presented their new findings to the medical examiner. The cause of Janet A.'s death was changed from suicide to undetermined. Detective Carl Rankin presented the evidence.
This is very unusual for a detective to come back in and ask to have something changed on the death certificate, especially something as important as from a suicide to at least undetermined.
The way was cleared to charge Robert A. for Janet's murder.
Robert A.
Detectives discussed their evidence with Franklin County Prosecuting Attorney Jeff Allen.
Once we had Professor McDonald's report, I was convinced that we had a case that we could take to a jury. So that was probably the main factor in my determination that we had a case that we could prosecute. We could, I think, clearly show, based upon Herb McDonald, the toxicologist, the friends and family members who had had recent contact with Janet A., that the defendant, the only other person in the house, was the person who had shot Janet A. She did not do it herself.
A warrant was issued for Robert A.'s arrest for the murder of his wife. He was taken into custody without incident.
I believe that they'd been arguing. I believe that Robert A. wanted 100% to go to Cincinnati, and he was demanding it.
The couple argued. Janet went up to bed.
Yeah.
She took sleeping pills to get a good night's sleep.
I think Robert A. laid on the couch, drunk, getting in more of a stupor and getting more mad as time went by. And I think Robert A. reached under the couch and he got the gun that he knew was there. The very first interview, he says, "I turned the light on." Well, I don't know about that. I think that he may have even had a flashlight with him to make sure that he didn't make a mistake in what he was about to do. And I think he took that gun, and I believe he walked up the stairs.
After killing Janet A., he put the flashlight on the dresser. Robert repositioned Janet's body. He got blood on his hand, so he wiped it across her upper chest. He planted the gun to make it look like a suicide. But underneath the gun, her blood had already dried.
Without the blood pattern analysis done by Herb McDonald, without the toxicology, without having as good a crime scene set of photographs as we had, there would have been no reopening of this case, there would have been no trial, and there would have been no conviction.
The jury at Robert A.'s trial heard the forensic evidence. They found him guilty of Janet's murder. He was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Killers go to great lengths to create scenarios that shift blame, leaving behind few traces of their guilt. But no matter how small or well hidden, forensic investigators live to expose these telltale traces and avenge the victims of murderous attraction.